Welcome to our Voices of Africa podcast, brought to you by Africa Practice, a strategic advisory firm supplying insights and advocacy solutions to corporations, investors, governments, and foundations in Africa. In a world with complex and interdependent challenges, we take the guesswork out of business engagement. We enable our clients to see more clearly in order to drive sustainable and equitable development.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Voices of Africa. It's the first in a special series that we are bringing to you together with Hyde Group, the owners and organizers of Invest in African Mining Indaba, the annual conference that takes place in Cape Town in February, and also with the African Minerals Development Centre, the AU agency charged with helping African Union member states to harness their mineral resources to foster industrial development. We've got a treat for you today. We've got a conversation that myself and Laura Cornish from Hyde Group, Laura and I are going to be jointly hosting Tatenda Mungofa. Tatenda is the CEO of Mureza Auto Co. It's Africa's first black-owned automotive designer and manufacturer. I don't think we've had anyone from the automotive industry in this series before, so it's a particular pleasure to have you on air with us. Automotives is a notoriously complex value chain, but Tatenda has a bold vision and he's making fast progress in realizing that vision. And it's examples like this and leaders like this that we need on the continent if we are to move up the mineral value chain and industrialize our continent. As our audience knows, too much of what is consumed in Africa is not produced in our region. So we're continuously exporting raw materials and then re-importing finished goods. We export these raw materials and then we pay for their way back after the value addition is done offshore, which is expensive. And in the process, we export the jobs that are created from the value addition. But Tatenda has a vision, as I said, for changing that. He's got a production facility in South Africa, and his vision is one that aligns perfectly with the goal of the African Minerals Development Centre, which is charged with supporting member states to ensure that we foster industrialization from our abundant raw materials and, dare I say, our abundant renewable energy potential on the continent as well. So welcome to Tatenda.
Marcus, how are you?
We're good today, thank you. Yes, we're good, Laura and I.
Laura, how are you today?
Oh, it's great to be here and so looking forward to our chat today. I think it's going to be a really good one.
Same here.
Great. Well, let's crack on. Tatenda, I've provided a very broad overview of work that you're leading with Mureza. But can you tell us more about Mureza and specifically the vision that you have for the automotive industry in Africa? And tell us also about your journey as an entrepreneur that has led you to founding this business.
Where to begin, Marcus? It's been a lifetime, but let me unpack it maybe in three very different sections. Firstly, Tatenda, and then I'll gravitate to Mureza, the company, and then Africa as a whole, and my being an African. So firstly, Tatenda is a very passionate car enthusiast. From the age of 7, my dad made sure that passion was ignited in me. And because he was a mechanic, I grew up around cars, literally spent every other day in a car. If I wasn't fixing one, I was driving one or selling one. So my whole life revolved around that. And the passion for the industry, the inquisitiveness. I've read through most car manufacturing scripts, manuals, workshop manuals, magazines. And at some point, I asked myself, where do these cars come from? A very broad and dumb question to some, but when you look at it from a mineral composition perspective, you begin to understand that a car is almost 60% steel, 30% plastic, and all other minerals that are involved in there. So with that question in my mind at a young age, I grew up with that curiosity to understand where it comes from, and that's how Mureza was born. It was a quest to develop a product from Africa. And having understood certain complicated value chains, like you call them, notoriously complicated value chains. It took me the greater part of 25 years to understand just a fraction of it. The beginning fraction. 25 years is how long it took me to like crack a code. And when I started Mureza in 2011 back in Zim, my ambition was to make a pickup truck because I felt that's the car that Africa needed. And that journey led me all sorts of places across this earth. And I began to understand how countries like China, some places in the Middle East, your Indias, Europe, developing cars and how it's creating value for their economies. And I asked myself, why can't we do this in Africa? And everyone would ask, every supplier, every component manufacturer, where do you get your resource from? Where do you get your minerals from? 90% of them get it from Africa. And when I was fortunate enough to then encounter what the African Mining Vision is doing, I began to understand that with a lot more depth and context because people had been researching this over and above. Now, as an African who is an entrepreneur, who has a business in a very tough industry, it's very, very rare for you to get, number one, a platform to speak, number two, recognition of your product or your business. And today, I'm actually honored that I'm representing as one of the first people on this particular platform to speak on my journey, to speak on what our business is doing, but to give confidence to the ordinary African that it can be done. I'm a testament to this being possible. And I can only hope that those that will hear me will be able to also cultivate their own businesses. They need not look at them as small businesses, but also look at how they integrate into other bigger businesses and how we can all develop this beautiful continent of Africa that is rich in resources.
Tatenda, I'm truly inspired by your message, by your objective and what you're looking to achieve as a business owner. It aligns very much with Mining Indaba's own objectives to talk about the role of the automotive industry in connection with mining. And in your particular instance, you represent the future of Africa in terms of what you want to do on the continent and for the continent. I do want to talk about, and I think we do need to get right into this from the beginning, the world of sustainable transportation. You can't really ignore the seismic shift happening in the automotive industry. Now, I know it has its ups and its downs, but over the last 2 years, there's been phenomenal growth in electric vehicle sales in 2022 and 2023. How do you see e-mobility contributing to Africa's economic transformation, particularly in terms of job creation and skills development? And feeding on from that, what challenges do you foresee in developing local value chains in e-mobility, from mineral extraction to vehicle production, charging stations, and even after-sales services?
Laura, we need more than one session for that answer, because it's very loaded, and you will understand why I'm so passionate about what I do as an African industrialist. First of all, I think the big opportunity of this transition is very obvious for us as Africans to look at. I mean, from Zimbabwe, they have arguably the best lithium resource that is being used currently. You get the DRC, they have the cobalt resource, the manganese is there in South Africa, the graphite is there. All of these are things that you put in an electric vehicle to make your lithium-ion batteries. Not to mention the copper that you need for most of the cabling, and obviously the steel. The Chinese have built arguably one of the biggest steel plants, if not on the continent, but well, let's say outside of China. That's one of their biggest steel plants is there in Zimbabwe. You can see how they are preparing to bring production to Africa, right? They're deliberately securing the mineral. They're deliberately putting in investment into what I would call precursor processes that beneficiate the mineral that is eventually going to produce something. And they are investing in energy. So those three pillars of industrialization is what drives the economy. It's a catch-22 for me. I'm enjoying what the Chinese are doing. They are leading this revolution. But as an African, I'm scared that we are getting left behind again, because Europe did it, America did it, China is doing it. Where is Africa in that conversation? It doesn't need to be rocket science because it's not. This industry has been around for over 150 years. And the first vehicles around the 1830s were actually electric vehicles. So we are just perfecting that which has been produced. But we have one unique advantage, if not two. We have the mineral resource right under our noses. We don't need to carry it too far. I think Marcus in his introduction was talking of the cost of shipping this out of the continent and then bringing it back. We save that time, we save that cost. We can do it locally, right? Then over and above that, we have a very young and energetic population that needs transportation. Transportation is a human need. It is not a luxury item. Most people think that a car is a luxury item because of the price tag. No, it is actually a means of transportation, if not of goods, but of people or services. So you can't ignore that in any economy, in any country or continent. So from that perspective, the work that is being done in this transition to new energy vehicles, because there's a few other options there besides electric vehicles. You've got your hydrogen, they're experimenting with all sorts of things. And these, again, are things you can find on the continent without having to go too far. Most internal combustion engine vehicles are popular because of the petrodollar situation globally. When big oil companies started to produce Brent crude oil that was going into vehicles either as fuel or as lubricant, that industry boomed. And that's what grew some of the world's leading economies. And they had a voice. I think institutions like OPEC were created to regulate that. And they have sustained multiple nations because of that. I know your Saudi Arabias have got your Aramco's. Africa can be that based on its current mineral resources. And if this transition were to happen correctly and we participate instead of just sitting on the sidelines, I think we will emerge as a leader. Will emerge as a voice to reckon with, because I've met my fair share of brilliant Africans who stay on this continent and are itching for an opportunity to demonstrate what they can do. The problem that I think is also there is the lack of belief. Maybe we are comparing too much with those that are already ahead of us, that have spent 150 years in R&D developing whatever they're doing. I read somewhere that BYD now has got the biggest R&D department with 100,000 people or something like that. And you're wondering, what do 100,000 people do in R&D? But the result is most of the technology gadgets we see that have got lithium batteries, that have got LCD screens, is because of that. But what are they doing at R&D? They are taking African minerals, processing them, designing a component, and producing a complete product that is retailed globally. So if you take the metrics or the numbers in Africa, 1.5 billion odd people, some of them quite young, I think 65% is still classified as youth. All of them need something. And I'm hoping all of them need a car or they need transport. But if the need is there, the market in Africa is very clear. The resource is there. So we now need to create interim industries that link the market to the product, or that link the market to the mineral via a product.
I think what you're really saying about the need to industrialize Africa is on point, and the need to find inspiration from those that are succeeding, doing it first, leading the charge, so to speak. And I believe, just based on what you've said, Mureza is one of those companies that other African entities, businesses, consumers can look towards and say, if Mureza can do it, then so can we. So tell us a little bit more about Mureza specifically, Tatenda. Where are you in this offering for sustainable vehicles, etc., in the market? Would be good to just get some more insight around that specifically and be inspiring to those that might want to follow in your footsteps.
Well, thank you. First of all, the name Mureza means a flag in my Shona language. So I was deliberate with that. I wanted everyone to learn Shona. So at least now we can safely say people now know a word in Shona. Then secondly, our vision is to be the flagship automotive brand for Africa. And notice we didn't say car manufacturer, because we realized that what we represent is more than just the car manufacturing industry. We represent the hope of an entire continent. And if you don't raise a flag high enough, no one is going to relate to your vision. And I remember watching at some point the first people that went on to the moon, the first thing they did was they planted a flag. So that became a point of reference for me, that if you want to do something bold and something that no one else thinks can be done, put a flag in it, and hence the name Mureza. Now, coming to the automotive industry, it's a shocking statistic that with all this mineral resource that we have, with all these engineers that we've birthed from our universities and those that have gone and worked even beyond Africa that understand this industry, we did not have a commercially viable automotive manufacturing company. I personally am shocked, but I think our company was meant to do it, because what I understood of Henry Ford, what I understand of Elon Musk, what I understand of Toyota, their journeys were actually transformative for their nations and their continents, right? 3 separate generations, 1 outcome: industrialization at a massive scale. Now, at Mureza, I design the cars. I'm a car designer by profession. I have a whole team that helps me with that. We've got an engineering team. We are now in pre-production stage. And what we have decided to do is to be deliberate with who our component suppliers are. We are currently trading a minimum of 120 small to medium component manufacturers in different respects. Some of them are doing composite materials because we think it's also quite an interesting technology that can help improve the cost, help improve the durability of a product, and also save on weight and also give it strength. But in that whole process of product development, supplier development, we have created an ecosystem that takes us from as deep down as mining lithium to some of the on-ground activities like agriculture for some of the composite fibers, and then to a factory. Those are 3 very different industries. I won't mention the infrastructure where buildings, factories, or charging infrastructure is going to be created. But if you take those 3 disciplines, your mining, agriculture, and then manufacturing, those are 3 totally different disciplines. And we need a lot of skill set and training. So we have invested a significant amount in terms of getting people trained to understand that in the context of our value chain as Mureza. It has taken us a little over 1.5 years to just get people to understand the basics. Now we are moving on to phase 2, where we are taking those basics and amplifying them and developing products with them. And we are going to launch soon, officially, so that we start hitting sales across the continent. We have 5 branches in 5 different countries: South Africa, Zimbabwe, Namibia, Zambia, and Senegal, working on DRC and Kenya as well. So we are at a point where we have a bit of context from all corners of the continent, how our products are going to impact different ecosystems. So in summary, I would say we are aiming to be that brand that brings together all these sectors. You can throw in technology in there. You can throw in a bit of AI as well as part of the technology. All of these things need to get done on the continent. And we have a good vision for the next 10 years, how we can do it with strategic partners. And we believe that as time progresses, maybe in the next 3 years, we are going to actually list on the JSE, where we would be inviting other people to be part of the vision that we carry. And our ambitions for listing are quite unique. You know, having started this business as an individual and other people joined, we've got some angel investors that came on board. Listing for us as Mureza is not necessarily about raising capital, but it is giving access to other Africans to own part of the vision, because I feel that is also important for the continent, where you can also say, I was part of that at some point. And this thing needs to live beyond us who are currently here. We hope it will transcend and go way into the future where we cannot even predict. But I'll leave you with that, stating that as Mureza, very ambitious. I'm not shy to say that we believe that people like Elon Musk, they've had a good run, but we can do better.
Tatenda, your aspirations don't just extend to being competitive or wanting to be competitive with global automotive companies, but what you're actually trying to do for the African continent. And it's the merger of those two desires that I have no doubt is going to ensure your success, just your dream to grow the African continent. Now, something you've touched on a number of times in your responses is the importance of the youth. When we look at Africa, and as you've mentioned, the majority of the population sits in that very young or youth age bracket. How important is it to grow this industry by supporting the youth? And how can the African continent do that so successfully in what is truly emerging as a new industry opportunity for Africa, and one that does represent the objective of industrializing the continent? Tell me about the youth and elaborate on that, Tatenda, how important that really is from your viewpoint.
Well, youth. First of all, we have to define the age bracket of youth. Hey, in most countries, it is people between the age of 16 and 35. And my understanding of that whole demographic is they're the most unemployed people on this continent. So when we speak youth, we are speaking unemployment, like people who have energy, can think, they have dreams, they have the time on their hands, but they have nothing to do. If you go into any township in South Africa or in Africa, you find people in that age range who literally are sitting, waiting for an opportunity. And that is a human resource that is dormant from an intellectual property perspective. Some of them are massively talented, but are in just difficult circumstances for them to grow their potential. So my ambition as a business owner is to find a way to plug into that group of people and get them to reach their full potential. Manufacturing doesn't happen fast. Agriculture doesn't happen fast. So they avoid those kind of categories. And recently I was on another platform, and I said, or someone said, we need to make manufacturing sexy. People need to understand that there's value in industries like manufacturing, because these young kids, they grow up, they have no idea the potential that exists for them in that space. It's just an untapped think tank. They have some of the most brilliant ideas. I spend quite a significant time in my day speaking to such people. And I'm shocked with the level of solutions they bring. And where we are set up in Pilanesberg, we are running an initiative that speaks to young people, particularly focusing on families that are what you'd call, what's the word? Dysfunctional families, where either one parent is not there. There's a lot of gaps in those. So in a community, it's a raw setting. We're just trying to give inspiration and hope to some of them that surely this can be done. And when you hear the words that come out of them, you're shocked. Where did this 13-year-old, 15-year-old, 18-year-old hear such things? So I'll just look at it from an overview and say, we all have a part to play to bring the youth together, for them to believe in themselves, for them to see their value, and to commercialize that value. And in that, industries do that, mines do that, but not from a handout perspective, but commercially viable initiatives that we can implement on this continent.
Now, I think you've led me straight to my next question, Tatenda, and talking about the youth and their aspirations and their need to do things quickly and achieve success quickly, just got me thinking around what you said right in the beginning, how long it took you to get Mureza off the ground. You spoke about a 25-year journey. So it just makes me wonder, what lessons can you share with other Africans who may be listening on to this podcast about the journey you've been on, and how to expedite or manage their expectations in terms of building industrialization aspirations on the continent? I'm sure they don't want to have another 25-year journey such as yourself, but they can learn from the lessons that you've gone through and take those on board and maybe move quicker. Because as you said as well, Africa's time is now. Our minerals are ripe for the taking now. How do we maximize on that right now and not take, another few decades to really industrialize Africa?
Well, I think I'm a fan of the adage that says, fail fast Start now, fail fast. There is no reason why we should delay. People speak of money or speak of capital. I didn't have any of that when I started. I just had passion, and I tried to find the relevant players, the relevant people that would feed into that passion. And because of the social media platforms we have now, you can connect to those people. I mean, even like places on like in LinkedIn or even Facebook. I mean, you can find a community somewhere where you plug into and people can support you. Put yourself out there. A lot of people in Africa have this belief that if you are doing something and it's important and it's big, hide it. And that's the worst thing you can do. It's the slowest route to achieving any form of success, especially on a big project, because you don't know who is seeing what you're doing and what support they can give you. When I travel a lot, I try to speak to local people as much as possible, understand them. And what I've discovered is if you remain quiet, people never know what you do. Some people have probably read about me but didn't know it was me when I was in the room. Only when someone said, no, but this is the guy who is manufacturing cars, and like, are you for real? And everyone comes around. So the lesson that I would give in terms of that, publicity is an asset if you use it well, right? Social media can give you coverage. I now do business with people from Senegal, and my business partner there, she was reading something on Facebook. I don't know what popped up. That's how she knew about Mureza. She connected, and it became a whole business situation that's now leading us to consider putting a manufacturing plant in Senegal. So those are some of the things that I think we just need to snap out of. These beliefs that hiding something important is going to protect it. No, it's a sure way for it to die. So let's make sure that we broadcast what we're doing. We are very purposeful in terms of what we're doing, and more like shoot first, ask questions later, because people tend to get analysis paralysis. They overanalyze something until a point where they don't do it anymore. So I'm not a fan of that. In these 25 years, I could have taken 25 more years. I would have probably done this when I'm in my 50s. But I just kept doing it, and became more confident. So repetition gives you confidence because you know what you want to do, and you probably would have figured out the early steps by yourself. When you get into a community, other people will walk the journey, can give you insights. Read. That's another thing that I'll tell people. When I'm not working, when I'm not in a meeting or doing some other work, I'm always researching, I'm always reading, I'm always trying to see what's happening in my industry. I get up at 5 a.m. just to read what's happening in China right now, because that's where all the action is. I follow most of their news articles pertaining to my industry. I watch a lot of podcasts. That's a way to also get quick, concentrated information on something that you're doing. But last but not least, action. That is what differentiates how far you go. You can dream it, you can think it, you can plan it, write it in a nice business plan, but if you don't do anything, someone in China will, and they are probably more advanced, so you'll be overshadowed. It's a miracle for me that even with all this that's happening in China, we're still relevant. We are still going on about our business with a lot of enthusiasm, because we've gotten confidence from doing, not from just speaking or writing about it. So yeah, those are some of the nuggets I would give to someone who has got a dream. Start now, fail very fast, learn your lessons, go back to the drawing board, repeat, but act on it. Keep acting on it, keep acting on it.
Thanks, Tatenda. It's inspiring to hear you speak. You mentioned a little earlier that you've got 120 component suppliers. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about how challenging it has been to find the components that you need for your Made in Africa vehicles, and what support you're getting from institutions, but specifically, I suppose I'm thinking about African governments in trying to support you to build that strong value chain that you need to produce your Made in African vehicles.
Marcus, that whole story of the supplier ecosystem is one of the most challenging bits of the business. Back in March of this year, we held what you call a supplier day. where we invited these 120 suppliers. We actually had to turn others away because our venue was small. Over 300 people pitched up. And these are established businesses, right, that work with existing OEMs, global OEMs, that came to see us because we represented the future of the industry, and some of them, their contracts either have expired or are being reviewed, and they're just being throttled by these big OEMs. So they have no clear prospects of survival. They are looking for something new, something different, something sustainable. And what I learned in that one day is it only takes one company to change the complexion of the whole value chain. Changing the acquisition method, because currently they are over-regulated by certain, let's say, OEMs or companies that they feed into. Their prices are fixed and they're given long contracts with penalties that they can't come out of. So it doesn't help African suppliers. And when I spoke to them, they all gave me their perspectives, what they think we should do differently. And suffice to say, our strategy is working. And one of the main challenges that I see exists is they're trying too hard, or some of them try too hard to be international standard before they even do the basics, right? The basics of making a part is just knowing the quantity of material, have the correct measurement or dimensions or shape of the thing, and producing 10 units of that. That's just the basic thing that you need to do. I can make a tire, let me make 10 and see how good I am. Then we assess quality after the fact. Most of them are starting at the extreme end. They want to be Pirelli or Goodyear when they start. So in supplier development, you then have to teach them the basics. Sometimes you have to create a supplier from scratch because I'll use a component that's critical in a car, but most people think it's complicated, but it's one of the simplest of things you can ever make. A dashboard, right? Others call it a cockpit. It's not magic, that thing. It's just a few things put together, and most of them are plastic. It's normally plastic, padded with leather, or any other material just to make it exquisite. You can put detailing in wood or whatever metallic finish you can put there. And it's a combination of 60 or 70 different parts, most of them plastic. So if you're making Tupperware or those plastic tins that you carry food, no, it's not a plastic tin, it's a plastic food basin, right? Or something like that. That is a simple circular shape or a rectangular shape. You can make a dashboard. It now just depends on how creative the designer is and the process of putting it together. So the supplier development now involves working with these 120 suppliers in their different fields. Some of them actually are aligned, so you can group them. There's different types of plastics. Obviously, the one inside the car is different from the one that is like in the engine bay or that pipes that fluid flows through. The dynamics are different there. But I would bet you that in Africa, you have all these disciplines scattered all over. You just need to concentrate them on a product in a specific process and procedure. So that's what we're currently busy with. And it takes about 12 weeks to get people to align with that. And what I've picked on, let's say, linking it to the minerals, those that are doing plastics, you're dealing with polymers, and that's normally a byproduct of your petroleum processes. So there's a lot of petroleum on this continent. I'm thinking recently the Dangote refinery has been opened. So the raw material is there. You just now need to define a product. So that's one of the byproducts of that Dangote factory that we can quickly look at as part of our value chain. If you're talking rubber, there's plantations there in your Liberias or Sierra Leones and other places in Africa. I was talking to people about cow hides, making leather for vehicles. We have plenty of cows on this continent. You wouldn't link the two, but there's nothing more different from an Italian cow, which we call Italian leather, and an African cow, which is African leather. I would prefer African leather, but for now, for the time being, people would say it's Italian leather, it's stitched in this way, but can we not stitch? Can we not put together these pieces of leather? So all of those are part of the supplier ecosystem. I just chose specific areas. One other one for me that is critical is glass, because glass is nothing more than silica, and you have got tons of it. It's so abundant. We should be one of the world leaders in making automotive glass or any glass. So the value chains associated to a car, any component, any product, I think we can do it in Africa. We just now need governments to lead by example, for us to say that, in terms of how to support these from the onset. In South Africa, there's a bit of advancement. They understand this, but the dialogue, again, is different. The entrepreneur is somewhat desperate and at a disadvantage. The government is benchmarking with an international standard. So that disconnection needs to be fixed. And it's a couple of conversations. And I think that whole equation can be resolved. So yeah, those are some of my thoughts at this point.
Thanks, Tatenda, for elaborating on that. We're just coming to the end of our recording now, and we traditionally invite our guests to paint a picture of a prosperous Africa, an Africa that can inspire the world, or that does inspire the world. You've given us some nuggets with the potential that you see for Made in Africa vehicles going forward, but I wonder if I could ask you really to summarize how you see the potential in terms of the contribution of this industry and everything that it reflects in respect of that huge value chain that you referred to, from the mine all through to the production of the finished good. Could I ask you to paint a picture for us?
Well, one thing you did is ask a designer to paint a picture. That's one thing we are very, very good at. So picture yourself in a Mureza electric car in the next 5 years, and you're driving from Kenya to Uganda on a new highway that has been created that connects all the way across to Angola. And you see charging infrastructure that you are reading, maybe not Mureza, because we are not necessarily charging station manufacturers, but one of our close partners is Grandview Energy. Maybe it's a Grandview Energy charging station that you find in almost every country on the continent. And you sit back and reflect to this day and say, we had a conversation with someone who suggested that it can be done, and we worked together until it was done. Every bit of equipment that probably you'll be using at that point, it could be a phone or a sketch pad or whatever, would be proudly made in Africa by Africans for Africans, including aircrafts, and I see new cities being built, right? Maybe it's a newfound passion that when you're creating a factory, infrastructure grows around that whole development. So if we're aiming for 4, it means we can be an anchor for 4 new cities. What does that mean? Some regions which are rural today might actually transform into becoming either semi-urban or full urban areas. And with that, access to new clean energy, sustainable energy, water, you name it, it would be there. That's my vision of Africa come 2030.
That's lovely to hear. Thank you, Tatenda. It's been really an inspiring story, your story. And I feel sure that those listening will be inspired and motivated to think boldly and ambitiously about the contribution that they can make to that picture you painted for us of an industrialized Africa. And as you say, with the abundant minerals that we have, and the abundant growing demographic, and some of those reflections that you gave us on the youth and the amount of knowledge and curiosity that exists amongst our youth, the opportunity to build a world-class industry that draws its components and suppliers from across the African continent is a very compelling picture. We wish you so much success and hope that you get all the support that you need to realize that success and all the benefits that would flow to so many in the value chain. So thank you, Tatenda, for your time today.
No, thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Laura, for having me. I look forward to further engagements in the future and wishing you all the success.
Thank you for tuning into a Voices of Africa podcast this week. Voices of Africa is a forum where Africa's leading experts weigh in on cross-sectional topics affecting the continent. Experts share their views on how we can unlock greater value that will benefit industry, government, and communities. For more of our insights, visit our website or subscribe to our weekly newsletter, Views on Africa, in the description.